Hi guys and girls, and welcome to this month's Q&Ant video. Now this is a new series where I discuss a whole variety of issues, and these are not limited specifically to Elite Dangerous, but can be surrounding gaming as a whole, or indeed any other topic. So the way that this works is that questions or indeed subjects are submitted by Patreon backers and YouTube sponsors. The video itself is then made fully available for everyone to watch. The idea behind the videos is that it's really generally about giving something a little extra back to those who help make this channel possible, and also having the ability to share that content with everyone else. I don't like to lock these sort of things behind paywalls. So, as always, I'd really like to thank everyone for everything that what they do, making this channel possible. Without your support, this channel really wouldn't be what it is. So yeah, thank you. It means a lot to me. So let's get straight on to this month's questions then. Spidey wants to talk about Frontiers Nerf bat. So the thing about Frontiers Nerf bat is that it's pretty darn huge, and it occasionally takes some pretty wild swings. That said, I personally don't think it's unfairly wielded, at least generally not unfairly. If we take a look back at the past few years, Frontiers have really only nerfed the crazy high earners, those things that are in the 150 million credits per hour region or above. And let's be realistic, there's been a few, 300 million credits per hour methods over the past few years. It's not unexpected then or unreasonable that Frontier would want to remove these. So, in my opinion, the real issue, the real problem isn't really these excessive credit earners, because after all, we can only expect them to move those sort of things. But rather the problem, as I see it at least, is that the game, generally speaking, is totally unbalanced in terms of credit rewards. Now, I often like to use the example of the Thargoid interceptor hunting. The Cyclops, the initial interceptor that come about, the first one, the low spec one we could call it, I guess, is still a pretty hefty target unless you're a very skilled player. So to take one on, you really do need a very high powered ship, and that means having a high rebuy cost. So you're really putting a lot of risk into that sort of task. Now the payout for destroying that Thargoid is just 2 million credits, so really the reward doesn't match the risk, at least I don't think it does. And the thing is, there are a ton of areas in the game that are just the same, so it's a little wonder that so many people jump on all these high credit earners when they become available. Now I'd also like to think that people tend to overestimate Frontiers Nerf bat. Right now, off the top of my head, I can think of at least one method that will earn around about 80 to 100 million credits per hour. And that method doesn't require any form of exploits. You can even actually do it without a board flipping. Now what's more is that Frontier are very much aware of this method. They've actually partially nerfed half of it, I guess, in the past, but they've left this part as it is. So what is it? Well, the method is the VIP passenger missions. Just look for ones that need to be delivered to long distance stations, and that's not stations that are hundreds of light years away, rather it's usually stations that are just a single jump away, but they're many of light seconds away from the local star. Sometimes 100,000 light seconds, sometimes 300,000 or 400,000 light seconds, or whatever you can find, but generally speaking, these make a lot of money. So really, the bottom line is that whilst Frontiers Nerf bat is quite heavy, they tend to leave alone the methods that earn around about 100 million credits an hour or less. At least I haven't seen them remove those sort of things. Now, Paul Stanley asks about premium content in Elite, that is, the sale of ships or other such things. And he asks whether or not I think this sort of thing will ever happen in Elite. Well, to that, I'd like to say a firm no. I really don't believe Elite will ever go in that direction. I've actually personally spoken to quite a few developers in the past for Elite Dangerous, and they're pretty much all unanimously against the idea of pay to win. Now, some people may like to point out that engineers is pay to win because obviously you require Horizons in order to actually access that. But in return, I'd like to point out that Horizons is no different to any other expansion in gaming history. It allows you to access new content, so I wouldn't really class it as pay to win. I do suspect that in the future there's going to be a lot more paid content, and that this will come in the form of atmospheric planets, gas giants, and eventually space legs. That's the ability to get out your ship and walk around. But I really don't see buying credits or ships for real world money as being a thing for Elite. Now, Ken Varley is interested in my video production. So one of the things that I like to do in this video series is show my working methods for creating the videos. This covers the software and the hardware I use, as well as how I capture footage and edit it. I tend to include this as a segment at the end of each monthly Q&A video, so do stick around for that if you're interested. There's going to be one at the end of this video as well. Ken also asks about the graphics mod I use for Elite. So, I've been using EDFX for a very long time. In the early days I used SweetFX, and I don't actually know if SweetFX is still going. or if it is, what type of form it's actually in. But like I say, I do use EDFX, and I've been using this for a very long time now. I've also been asked quite a few times to do an updated video on how to use EDFX, so I'm going to take a look at doing that and maybe try and put a video together over the next few weeks for that. Now, Varuna has a number of questions here, and one of them highlights an area for some potentially great gameplay in Elite. So the first question, what are your thoughts in regards to atmospheric planetary landings and possibly player developer expectation about this element applied to heavily populated planets such as Earth? So personally, atmospheric worlds are my most anticipated feature for the game, and to be honest, they always have been ever since Elite Dangerous was announced back in 2012. The problem is, we know so little about it. We really don't know when they're going to come, and I guess some could say we don't even know if they're going to come. Now what we do know, however, is that planetary surfaces have always been planned to be released in stages. The first iteration was the basic rocky and ice worlds, which we now have had for a few years. The next step after that was going to be basic atmospheric worlds without life, so worlds similar to Mars and Venus of today. Now I'm actually pretty hopeful that these type of worlds are not too far away and that they're going to be seeing them within the next year or so. The ongoing development of the game and the upcoming changes for Chapter 4 do kind of suggest that Frontier are aiming in this type of direction, especially with the new lighting system and the new coloration system, as well as the ongoing work on planets. As for planets with life and cities like Earth, well, I think that's going to be an absolutely massive undertaking. I really don't think it's going to be something that's going to happen for a very, very long time, if I'm being honest. Now, although that said, it does depend on how well Frontier actually implement atmospheric worlds. If they implement them well enough, then just maybe it will only be a few steps to try and bring in the next type of atmospheric worlds. We do know, after all, that the technology for great vibrant landscapes with animals is there, and Frontier do have that. Just take a look at Jurassic World Evolution, for example. And that game actually runs on the same engine as Elite Dangerous, the Cobra engine. So regarding the developers' thoughts and expectations on this, well, that one's a lot harder to judge. It's pretty clear that David Braben is very excited, and I think that means they're basically going to happen one way or another. I think he won't give up until it does happen. I also personally know that Frontier are keen to continue working on the game and develop things as far as they possibly can, so I fully believe that atmospheric worlds like Mars are on the way. Earth-likes is a lot harder to judge. I think they will come, but it will be a very, very long time away. Now, it's not that the possibility or the ability to generate planets like that doesn't exist, because the technology has existed for a very long time. You only have to look at Altera to see a great example of an Earth-like world that's rendered procedurally. There's also a whole bunch of demos out there of procedurally generated cities, so I think that's going to happen as well. But I guess it really comes down to how detailed Frontier want to get with this. Would they want us to be able to land in cities and have a GTA-like experience, for example? I'd love that to happen, but it may not be realistic. On the other hand, being able to fly over cities and land in approved landing zones is quite possible and quite feasible, and hopefully it's something that's going to come. But of course, really, I'd love that full GTA experience. Who wouldn't, after all? Now, Varuna's second question is, what are my thoughts on regards to adding additional elements to simulating gravity within the game mechanics? For example, getting too close to stars in Supercruise. So I think this is an absolutely fantastic concept, and it's not one I'd previously given that much thought to. We know the game simulates gravity very well already, and this is something that Scott Manley proved with the orbital mechanics video he did quite a while ago, and you can see this video linked below. Now, gravity does have a massive impact already on certain existing worlds, or on all existing worlds actually, but it's especially noticeable if you try and land on 9G worlds or even a 13G world, and there are a few of those out there. But if you try and do that, you'll immediately be able to see how those gravitational forces affect your ship. Although that said, there's no explanation as to why the pilot can cope with those levels of G-force, at least as far as I'm aware, but do correct me if I'm wrong. Now, one area that I suspect will truly come into play with these types of gravitational forces, much in the way as Varuna suggests, will be when we get to gas giant gameplay. Now, David Braben has already spoken about this in the past, and he's really talked about how it would work visually. He talked about the massive cloud formations and how they'd create massive wells as you enter the inner eyes of the storm, but never actually spoke about the gravity forces on these worlds. But that said, I really doubt that Frontier would overlook this. It actually has huge potential for gameplay, as well as huge impact on the flight mechanics. So yeah, I'm actually really pleased that Varuna brought this subject up, as it makes me pretty excited for gas giants, something I've not given too much thought to before now. So there we have a few pretty long answers here. There's a few more to come, and these all so far have been really good topics. And if any of you would like to put your own questions or topics down in the future, then do check out the Patreon page that I've linked below. You can also alternatively check out the sponsor button that's linked below the video. There's a special community tab on my YouTube channel that everyone can see, but sponsors will be able to see posts there for the Q&A video topics. So on to the other questions. Ross Brocklesby, and I apologise if I pronounced anyone's names wrong here, but Ross talks about the old gaming systems that had got us into the hobby. And that's something that's really interesting. He spoke about the Sega Master System as well as a Sega Mega Drive, and I used to play on both of those with my brother. He had a Master System, and well, I really got to know that platform pretty well. Two of the games I really remember from back then are Wonder Boy and Monsterland, which was recently re-released as a remake. I got that on my PlayStation 4, and the famous, or perhaps the infamous, Alex Kidd, which really was a great game. Spent a lot of time on both of those. But that said, my first gaming platform wasn't actually a console. It came a little earlier than the Master System and was the ZX Spectrum 48K. Now, there's far too many games I've played on this for me to really remember. I think my first game was actually a little title called BMX Racers. It was over here in the UK. I don't know if that was released elsewhere in the world. I also played a load of Jet Set Willy and another game called Sabrewolf. Both of those are very, very nice little games. The arcade scene of the 80s and 90s was also a very special place to me, and that really did get me into a lot of different games. The 80s Star Wars cabinet, of course, was a really standout one. That was great. I don't think anyone of the time who actually spent any time in the arcade in the 80s would be able to forget that. And I also spent a lot of time later on both R-Type as well as Strider. Forgotten Worlds is also a favourite of mine. That's quite standout and not something I've thought about for quite a long time now I think about it. Eventually in the 90s I got a hold of an Amiga and got myself a copy of Frontiers Elite 2. So yeah, a whole load of different gaming platforms back then. I also had an Atari ST for a while. So yeah, it really takes me back. Right, Vincent Chu has a bunch of questions here, and I apologise if I don't get through all of them. If I do miss any, then do be sure that I'll include them in the next video. I'm very cautious about making this video too long. It's actually getting on quite a while already, but hopefully you're all actually enjoying it. So the first question here in this list is, the larger ships in Elite Dangerous always feel so empty. Do you think that Frontier will ever incorporate NPC crews to aid the running of a ship? So yeah, that's a really good question. It's something I'd really love to see. NPC crews were always a big thing back in Elite 2. In fact, you couldn't actually fly certain ships without them, or I may also remember, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I seem to remember that you could sometimes fly some of the ships, but not to the full capability without the crew. I do know that certain ships you couldn't even take off. Anyway, like a lot of people, I was kind of taken back, and I'm very surprised when Frontiers said that multi-crew wouldn't actually come with NPC crew members. And I'm pretty sure that Frontier couldn't have failed to notice that there's a strong desire for NPC crew members among the player base. So the original design documents for Elite Dangerous back in 2013 actually spoke of both NPC wings as well as NPC crew. So I suspect that it would happen eventually, but I doubt that it's very high up on their list, so it may be quite a wait. Then again, I can't speak for them, and it may not ever actually happen, who knows, but it is something that I really would like to see. Right, James P has asked, have you ever been asked to provide your voice for a COVAS? So as some of you may know, the COVAS system in Elite Dangerous is the in-ship voice, which by default is called Verity. There are other COVAS systems available from the Frontier store, each with different names, and these were created for Frontier by HCS voice packs, who actually have a whole bunch of other voice packs that extend the ship's voice significantly. So HCS's own voice packs are separate from COVAS, and they actually require a third-party program known as Voice Attack, and that in turn integrates into Elite Dangerous, so you can actually use the voice packs as an alternative for the in-game ship. So essentially there are two ways to upgrade your ship voice. You can buy a COVAS from Frontier, and these are direct in-game upgrades that you can outfit at the outfitting screen, or you can buy a voice pack from HCS, which are external options. It's also worth noting that the external packs are officially licensed. So both types of voice packs were created by HCS. So it does turn out that I do have a voice pack with HCS, and I recorded a couple of years ago. That's called Obsidian, and it's available from the HCS website. I have no idea about COVAS though. It's not something that either Frontier or HCS have ever approached me about, and to be honest, I can't actually see it ever happening. But then again, you never actually know, and maybe one day something like that will turn up, but not as far as I know. Simon R says, if you could make one enhancement to the SRV, what would it be? Well, it's pretty hard to say. I kind of would like it perhaps if the SRV didn't spin out so often, but I'm sure people would tell me that's down to my driving skills, or lack of them rather. I would, however, like some new SRVs, maybe some heavy lifters that could carry more cargo, or ones that would be good for mining, have mining capabilities down on the planetary surfaces, but that would require new types of gameplay. James C says, how are the devs going to combat botting issues, or will they leave it just like Blizzard did with World of Warcraft, even though it plays havoc with power play and the background simulation? Now, I'm sure there are many out there who will tell you that there are no botting issues within Elite Dangerous whatsoever. It's a discussion I've had quite a few times, and people have quite often said to me, well, there's no bots, I've never seen any. However, I do personally know that it is a problem, and that it does cause problems for a lot of people and a lot of groups out there. Frontier do insist they're doing something about it, but last I heard it was still an ongoing issue. That said, I haven't really looked into it recently, so I guess it's really a very difficult subject because it's one of those things that few developers, regardless of the game, will actually actively talk about. Bottom line then, I doubt we'd see Frontier do much more than they're doing already, but then maybe they're doing quite a bit. I guess we don't really know, but I guess most people will say they're not really doing enough, as there is still a lot of bots out there, unfortunately. Matt C says he'd love some tips and tricks on how to develop his voice into that soft, deep tone he has. Well, I wish I could give you some tips. For the longest time, I was always very self-conscious of my voice and thought that it was pretty bad. And yeah, I really did lack confidence with it. Totally opposite to what you may expect. And it's only in recent years that I stopped feeling that way. I guess if you want to use your voice, then just give it a try. It's what I ultimately ended up doing. You never really know what can come from it. Right, David J says, does he feel that higher quality items like rares should pay more? He's done a bunch of rare runs in the past few years, and the payments really aren't worth the interdiction hassle or the distances that you're forced to travel. So I kind of touched on credits earlier on in the video. There really is a massive imbalance in the way the game tries to achieve profit. It's something that really needs to be fixed, but unfortunately I really don't think that Frontier sees it as an issue. I'd love to see trading be more skill driven, a game where you have to actually track down rare opportunities. But it seems we already have the trading update in Chapter 1, and I can't see Frontier changing anything for the rest of Beyond at the very least. But again, as I said earlier, I can't speak for Frontier, so I guess anything is possible. But really, in my personal opinion, is that the way it is now is the way it's likely to stay. David T says, how do you envision atmospheric planets might actually work in the current game engine? Should they ever decide to develop that? So again, I touched on atmospheric planets early on. Now, I've no idea when they will eventually turn up, but I do think they will turn up, and it seems to me that Frontier are working towards them right now. At LaveCon recently, they talked about the new lighting system, and they stated multiple times that the aim of the new lighting system is to create different styles of lighting in different environments. And when you really think about it, there aren't all that many different environments in space, is there? So personally, I kind of took that as a massive hint. James P asks my thoughts on other interesting space phenomena. So we know that lightning storms are coming. It seems that they are space-based. Well, Frontier actually confirmed they are space-based. That was told to us by Adam Woods, who's the executive producer for the game. As for other phenomena, well, I really don't know. We do know that comets are not coming in Q4, as Sandro Samarco, the lead designer, said they're not coming then, but he did say they may come at a later date. By all means, what's coming in Chapter 4 is not the end of the road, so there's plenty more to come later on. But what other type of space phenomena could there be? Well, one thing I'd really like to see are accretion disks. At the moment, there's nothing like that in Elite Dangerous, and if you have a look right here in Space Engine, you can see this is Sagittarius A. It does have an accretion disk, and it looks absolutely fantastic. If you look at the little display icon, or the thing to the right of the HUD in Elite Dangerous, or the left rather, that also displays accretion disks on some black holes when you actually look at them. So I suspect the data is there for them in the game, but they're not actually visually represented yet. So that's one phenomena I'd like to see in Chapter 4. Hopefully it will come. Beyond that, I think there may be other phenomena down on the planetary surfaces, and this is where the new probes will come into effect. There's a great piece of concept art here. This shows what's called a point of interest. There's nothing like this in the game just yet, so who knows, maybe this is a Chapter 4 thing. And Ryan OD wants to know what my thoughts are on Thargoids being rolled out. Specifically, do I think there will be actual reasons to shoot them? Well, some people would probably argue we already got reason to shoot them. The Thargoids have attacked a number of Federation fleets and Imperial fleets. There's no Alliance fleets in the game, so I guess they're leaving the Alliance alone at the moment. They've also destroyed a number of humanities stations, but these all seem to be Aegis stations for the most part. But whether or not that actually constitutes a reason to go and attack the Thargoids, I guess will depend on the individual. It was fun to see Obsidian Orbital burn, and it was great that so many people actually helped out with getting that back online very, very quickly. Beyond that though, I don't really know. Personally, I'd like to see the Thargoids spending a lot more time interdicting people, both in supercruise as well as in hyperspace. Be a bit more of a threat and try and give people a reason to actually shoot them. There's also a lot of feeling out there that the Thargoids that we're seeing right now are not the real threat, and that there's some other Thargoids that may show up sooner rather than later. I guess for that, we're going to have to wait and see. So that's pretty much it. That brings us to the end of the questions. Once again, it's been absolutely awesome doing this video. I really do love all the questions. I really do love all the subjects that we get to talk about, and I love the chance to respond to all of you. So do keep the questions coming. Do keep the suggestions and the topics coming as well. And if you want to get involved with these videos, then do check out the Patreon page below. I've put a link there. Or alternatively, you can have a look at the sponsor button below. But either way, whether you're a Patreon or a YouTube sponsor, or whether you're just a regular viewer of the YouTube channel, whether you're a subscriber or not, I'd really like to extend my thanks to all of you. It really does mean a lot to me that you enjoy watching the videos, whether you watch them all or whether you just watch a few. It's a great thing, and it really does mean a lot to me. So as we get to the end of the video then, I do have a segment here where I'm going to show you one of the things about my setup, my working process, and how I create the videos. So this week, actually last week rather, saw the release of Jurassic World Evolution. So it was pretty interesting actually. I did some live streams on that and actually played it on the PlayStation 4. Got a few questions from people asking me how I capture from the console and stream it onto YouTube, so we're going to talk about that today. So if you want to capture from your console, whether that's an Xbox or a PlayStation, you need a capture card. And I've been using an Elgato one for a while now. I've actually recently gotten a new one though. This is the 4K60 Pro. I think that's their top end card. It's actually quite expensive, in the £300 mark, £360 I do believe. Now I was fortunate that Elgato were kind enough to actually send me this. And just so that we're clear, this isn't a paid promotion, no money or anything like that has changed hands. I did just get in contact with Elgato and, well, basically they sent this over. Now, you by no means need this precise capture card to capture from a console. Elgato do have another range, and there are a few other manufacturers out there with price ranges from about £60 upwards, I believe. But the more you pay, the better you get, obviously. So my 4K60 Pro sits right inside my PC, which tends to make it very, very efficient. And I've then got a HDMI cable connecting the PC to the PlayStation 4 or vice versa. So that lets you see the signal here in the Elgato software, or you can use other software such as OBS, which is free. Now what I really like about this is how it's all instantly shown on my PC screen. Everything I do on the PlayStation 4 shows up on the PC straight away. There's no delay or lag there. Now essentially I've got two options here. Sometimes I record this straight to disk and then import it into Premiere Pro and edit it. You saw me doing that in the previous Patreon or the Q&Ant video last month. So if you do want to see my editing process, then do check out that. You can see a little link just appearing at the top of the screen right now. And the other way I use this is to use OBS to stream to either Twitch or YouTube, and sometimes even both, using the Restream.io website. So there we have it. That's basically how I capture and stream from the PlayStation 4. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I will be back with another one next month. Meanwhile, around the 1st of July, I will be opening up the Q&A section on both Patreon as well as the YouTube community section. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.